Did Donald Trump just declare war on Boeing? That's what the internet thinks. Overnight, rumors exploded across TikTok, Reddit, even AI-generated YouTube news videos claiming Trump slapped a 200% tariff on America's biggest aircraft manufacturer. Wild, right? But what if I told you that rumor was false, and yet the truth is far more dangerous? As of today, June 2025, there is no 200% tariff on Boeing aircraft. But what did happen is arguably more destructive than the fake news that went viral. In just 48 hours, the ground under America's aerospace industry has started to crack, and few people realize how deep those fractures go. But we are going to break it all down. So before we dive in, ask yourself this: what if the collapse of Boeing doesn't come from a crash, but from a tariff? Now hit that like button to help us fight the algorithm and keep these videos reaching more people. And if you want the full story, the real story, stay with me until the end. Because this isn't just about Boeing. It's about a domino effect that could ground the entire American aviation supply chain. Here's what really happened. President Donald Trump didn't target Boeing directly. He didn't need to. Instead, he did something far more sweeping. This week, Trump announced that the United States would double tariffs on all imported steel and aluminum. That's right, the rate jumps from 25% to 50%, effective June 4th. No exemptions. No carve-outs. No warning. So what does this have to do with Boeing? Everything. Because while Boeing doesn't import finished planes, it does rely heavily on imported aluminum and steel to build every aircraft it sells. We're talking about the fuselage, the wings, the landing gear, the interior frame. These materials aren't optional, they are foundational. And when their prices double overnight, Boeing's cost of building each jet shoots up. But this isn't just a story about rising costs. It's a story about timing. And the worst possible timing imaginable. After years of crisis, the 737 MAX disaster, the COVID collapse in air travel, global delivery delays, Boeing was finally clawing its way back. One of the key pillars of that comeback: reopening the Chinese market. Now here's where it gets serious. For 4 years, Boeing's ability to sell and deliver jets to China has been locked in a deep freeze due to trade tensions. But recently, under temporary US-China détente, Boeing deliveries were just starting to resume. The Chinese government even gave the green light for backlogged aircraft orders to move forward. It was supposed to be a $10 billion recovery lifeline. And then came the tariffs. Trump's decision to double down on steel and aluminum levies, right in the middle of fragile US-China diplomacy, was taken in Beijing as a hostile signal. And the backlash came swiftly. China's Ministry of Commerce didn't name Boeing directly. They didn't have to. The statement accused the US of economic provocation and warned of reciprocal measures. Within days, Boeing insiders reported that at least 2 jets bound for Chinese airlines were suddenly placed on indefinite delivery hold. That's not a delay. That's a standoff. And the retaliation is just beginning. According to multiple sources, China is now quietly suspending the issuance of airworthiness certificates for new Boeing aircraft. Translation: the planes can be built. They just can't fly into Chinese airspace. That's a nightmare scenario. Because when a finished jet sits idle, it's not just collecting dust, it's bleeding money. Think about it, airlines can't put those planes into service. Leasing companies can't finalize contracts. And Boeing can't collect payment. Every grounded jet is millions in frozen capital. Still think the 200% tariff rumor was the real threat. Here's where things get worse. Much worse. Europe is watching. And they don't like what they see. The European Commission has now warned that unless the US walks back the 50% tariff hike, counter-tariffs could be imposed by mid-July. And guess which industry is on the target list? Aerospace. We're talking about spare parts, maintenance contracts, and key components that Boeing depends on from European suppliers. Now remember, Airbus, Boeing's arch-rival, is headquartered in Toulouse, France. If the EU decides to tilt procurement, licensing, or export support toward Airbus while freezing out Boeing, the playing field goes from unfair to unplayable. But let's come back home. Because even America's closest partner, Canada, is firing back. As one of the top exporters of aluminum to the US, Canada was blindsided by the new tariffs. And they are not sitting quietly. Already, several Canadian provinces have begun to restrict the purchase of US aerospace equipment in government contracts. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce didn't mince words. They called Trump's move economic sabotage against North American supply chains. And behind the scenes, Chrystia Freeland has warned US diplomats that Canada is preparing a list of retaliatory measures. If those go live, Boeing loses a critical aluminum partner, and potentially much more. So, what's the net result? For Boeing, this means uncertainty across every stage of production. Material costs rise. Delivery timelines stall. Foreign regulators hesitate. And international buyers start asking tough questions. How do you price a plane when the metal that builds it is now volatile? How do you compete globally when your rivals don't face these restrictions? And how do you survive when your recovery hinges on diplomacy, and diplomacy just got torpedoed? Let's talk numbers. The US Chamber of Commerce estimates that previous steel tariffs cost US manufacturers over $34 billion in added expenses. This latest increase, it's projected to push that even higher. And who's on the hook? Not the raw metal producers, they are cheering. It's companies like Boeing who use that steel. The Aerospace Industries Association has already sounded the alarm. They warned that the new tariffs could make US aircraft less competitive on the global market. That's not a small thing. It's a red flag for every American aerospace firm trying to win international bids. But even that's just the surface. Underneath it all, there's a legal time bomb ticking. A federal trade court recently tried to block Trump's use of emergency economic powers to issue sweeping tariffs without congressional approval. But an appeals court stayed that decision, for now. The result? Trump has a green light. But lawsuits are stacking up. Several aerospace suppliers, the ones who build the wing flaps, the cabin frames, the landing gear assemblies, are preparing to challenge the tariff hike. Some are citing force majeure. Others are accusing the government of breaching long-standing supply contracts. And Boeing? While they are staying quiet publicly, the company has frozen all non-essential purchases of imported aluminum. They've also paused a planned tooling upgrade at their Charleston facility, a clear signal that uncertainty is halting investment. Meanwhile, Boeing execs are scrambling behind the scenes, seeking a waiver from the Department of Commerce. But Trump has refused to grant any carve-outs. So what happens next? Airline CEOs are getting nervous. Delta, Southwest, and United all have outstanding orders with Boeing. And while outright cancellations are unlikely, financial renegotiations are now on the table. If Boeing passes the metal costs onto the airlines, fares could rise. Routes could be slashed. Fleet upgrades could be postponed. And the leasing market? It's getting tighter by the hour. Companies like AerCap and Avalon, who finance fleets for dozens of international carriers, are now recalculating leasing costs to factor in tariff-driven price volatility. One executive warned that the entire global aviation sector could be repriced around protectionism. His call for a new international treaty to keep aircraft tariff-free. It was met with silence from Washington. So, if you're still watching, here's the question that matters: is Boeing in trouble? Not in the obvious way. Not from a viral rumor or a one-off policy. But from the slow, grinding reality of political pressure turning into economic damage. This is death by 1,000 tariffs. We are watching an American giant get squeezed between rising costs, global retaliation, stalled deliveries, nervous customers, and legal chaos, all at the same time. And it's not just Boeing. Every aerospace company, from engine makers like GE to seat suppliers to avionics firms, is now reconsidering their contracts and operations. In fact, there are unconfirmed but credible reports that at least one major aerospace component manufacturer is preparing to shift part of its production to Singapore. Not for tax reasons, but for trade stability. Let that sink in. In 2025, the greatest risk in global aviation isn't mechanical failure. It's political instability. So the next time you hear that Boeing's facing a 200% tariff, remember, that's not the real story. The real story is the 50% tariff that's already here. The real story is the quiet chaos already unfolding behind closed doors. And the real story is that while steel may be stronger than aluminum, politics is breaking both. If this video helped you understand what's really going on, hit that subscribe button. Help us get this truth out. And in the comments, tell us, do you think Trump's tariffs are saving American jobs, or putting more of them at risk? Because in this new trade war, the targets aren't always who you think, and the consequences are no longer hypothetical.